Hi, I'm Annie Botticelli, and welcome to my July 2019 horoscope report for you. It is my intention for this video to give you the information that I believe that you need to make this the best month possible and learn a little astrology while you're at it. Definitely go to my website, anniehelpsyou.com, where I have a very extensive astrology blog, including blogs on the new and full moons and how best to use those power periods. If you are interested in learning astrology and you resonate with how I teach, check out my astrology apprenticeship program, also at anniehelpsyou.com. Definitely check out my new book, that has become a beautiful bedside companion and purse-toting companion for my fellow spiritual seekers, an Amazon bestseller, Radical Prayer, Transform Your Life and the World in 28 Days. And you can see that at radicalprayerbook.com. So what do we have in store for you this month? I'm going to go into lots of details. Let's check them out now. Hello, Virgo friends. Welcome to my July 2019 horoscope report for you. We have a wild month ahead with continued eclipse changes, some sudden dramatic endings, amazing new openings, 2 new moons, and Mercury retrograde. Plus, we have clusters of energy in certain areas of your chart. You can expect help from friends and acquaintances. You can expect surprises having to do with money and funding and possibly even love. And you've got work opportunities that are coming aplenty. Lots of questioning about your tribe, friendships, and your place in your group. And that questioning process can result in massive up-leveling. So we have those opportunities coming to you this month. I want to go into lots of detail and show you the charts for the early, middle, and late degree placements so that you can learn some astrology and understand more about what the month has in store for you. After dropping in the charts and talking about those details, I will also give you a Mercury retrograde tutorial. We have Mercury retrograde half of our lives, and it's important to understand what to know about this transit so you can ride with the rhythms instead of against them. And then I will go into the general transits, including my dates to note for the month and other things that I believe you need to know about the tone of this month in order to be able to use the energies in the best way. So let's look at the charts now. Okay, so to make the most of the information I'm about to give you, although some of the things I talk about will be true for all Virgo placements, I'm going to differentiate out the early, middle, and late degree placements. So if you are an August born or 0 to 9 degrees, you are early. Middle is around September 1st through 10th, or 10 to 19 degrees, and late is around September 11th through the rest of the sign, or 20 to 29 degrees. And if you're watching for your rising sign or your moon sign, then yes, this is still for you. I do always recommend to watch the horoscopes for both your sun and rising sign. And people who watch for their moon sign also get pieces that are relevant to their total astrological picture. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is how these planets, let's see, we'll use the middle degree chart. But what I'm going to talk about is true for all of you. As the planets move through Cancer, and I'm circling Venus here because you can see it's very soon about to be in Cancer. These Cancer placements are continuing to make beautiful 60-degree angles to your Virgo placements. This is a time of year, the time of year when planets move through Cancer, where you have a massive amount of opportunities that come from this amazing amount of 60-degree angles. So remember, 60-degree angles are like ingredients on a counter. I always think of a pie, ingredients for a pie. And if you look on your counter and you have ingredients to make the pie, then if you pass by the counter again and say, where's my pie? Like if you look at this month and say, where are my sweet things? Often you have to do something, okay? So it takes action on your part to use the opportunities that come to you. Sometimes sweet stuff will just come without you having to do anything. But for the most part with these 60-degree angles, there are ingredients on the counter and you have to do something with them to create a yummy pie. Okay, so we have that going on. All right, let's get that out of there. The next thing that I want to note is that all early, middle, and late degree placements have very full 10th and 11th houses. You see early, middle, and late. Okay, so, and this is also going to include Mercury retrograde through the 11th for each of you. So let's talk about what happens when we have a focus on these fields of experience in life and how you can best use that energy. We'll just use any of the charts here, but we are talking about opportunities for all of you. Okay, so 10th house is accentuated. This is work, career, employment. So lots of focus, lots of energy on that area. If you are a person who's out of work or looking to make some changes, things that you have tried to do in the past or contacts from the past will often come of benefit because this whole month is covered in Mercury retrograde. It's possible that some new opportunities could come in or some interim possibilities. Retrogrades are notorious for an interim position of some sort. And sometimes you don't know it's an interim position until you get in it and then it's short term and then you go on to something else. But it doesn't matter. Things that come up at this time, you can, in general, feel free to say yes to as long as your intuition is on board, and make sure you read everything carefully and get things in writing that you're promised, because when Mercury's in retrograde, sometimes we're not seeing clearly or we don't have all the information. It doesn't mean you can't say yes. It just means, you know, there could be something more temporary about it, which doesn't have to turn out to be a bad thing. It's just something to note. It could be a bridge possibility. Or you could not have all the information. If for important negotiations, if you can push off your agreements until the middle of August, the stars will be better for clarity then. But because of the eclipses, there are going to be a lot of extra opportunities. And because of Mercury retrograde bringing things back from the past, even though it's not retrograde in the house of work, it is retrograde in the house of contacts, connections, and groups and organizations. So a lot of people from the past or options from the past could come back in. And that's for all of you. But I do like, you know, as we get closer to middle August, for the more concrete, permanent, longer term things, if possible. If not, just roll with whatever you can. 10th house can also relate to fathers, father figures, authority figures, and issues with them, or trying to become an authority figure, or you know, your place out in the world, whatever that looks like. I realize a lot of the people who are listening may not be interested in work or employment. Those days for them are over. And I often see this 10th house has to do with what it is you're doing here, like, you know, why you came here. And that can often come up at times of 10th house focus. So if you start getting some opportunities to do something that feels like something you've always wanted to do, or something that you feel like you're supposed to do, you might see the energy manifest that way. Or a dad or an authority figure might need help or have something notable going on, or a dad or authority figure might wind up helping you. So, you know, tune into the father figure energy in a big way. Okay, so for all of you, this is, the 11th house is also very much accentuated. And the 11th house has to do with networking, social media, internet-based projects, friendships, friends, groups, anything with networking, anything that has to do with technology, cutting edge things, futuristic things, nonprofits also. So you might see those areas come into focus. Getting help from other people and connecting with other people is a really great way to use this energy. If you're not circulating either online or in person, you might not be able to best take advantage of this. And again, it favors contacts from the past, but a new person could pop in, but your relationship with them might turn out to be different than you think it is. Again, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Just kind of be aware that something about what's going on is going to change. For those of you who are in the dating scene, in general, the retrograde cycle is better more for reconnecting with people who you knew from the past or who you connected with in the past, rather than new people, unless you're not trying to find a permanent person, because it could bring in a lot of temporary energy. Now, that being said, if you do meet someone that you think is the love of your life in Mercury retrograde, don't dismiss them. Just watch the energy, because there are a lot of exceptions and ways that this can manifest, but it's just a general rule to note. I will talk about I will drop in a Mercury retrograde tutorial here at some point that will give you more information on how to best navigate these energies. Finding your tribe, connecting with your tribe, like-minded people, Questions about your groups and your work with social media could be a way that this Mercury retrograde is coming up, because remember that Mercury retrograde brings in this questioning, something being called into question. So you might be second guessing or redoing your relationship with people. You might either return back to a group that you had been affiliated with before, like old friends or groups, or you might just be questioning, is it time for you to shift? And a lot of this could have to do with up-leveling. Up-leveling is one of my favorite words. And it just has to do with taking your game up to the next level. And sometimes a group, you've served it and it has served you, and it could be time to move on from it. This is a good time for experimenting and trying things on. It's not always the best time for making a final decision unless it's out of your hands. So again, if you think you've decided something about ending a friendship or changing a group, just feel in, and the energy should be more clear come mid-August. The 11th house is also the house of big wishes and dreams. Not the dreams that you have at night, that's the 12th house. But like your big dreams, if someone were to ask you, what is it you really want to do? If you had a choice and you could do something really big, what is that? When you have your 11th house energized, including the movement of the sun through there, it gives you wishes. And brilliant astrologer Jan Spiller says when the sun moves through your 11th house, you get 40 wishes. Now, this time is going to be a little staggered for you all. As you can see, the sun at the beginning of the month for the middle degree people isn't quite there yet. And for the late degree people, it's not going to be there until later in July. But at some point this month, there's going to be something, a window that opens up for your big wishes. So that's 40 wishes. Can you imagine? Yeah, so I would get your notebook ready and start making your wishes. Because what's the worst that could happen, right? They won't come true if that's the worst, but they could come true, and you have a lot of energy energizing those big wishes now. Definitely make sure that you watch my June horoscope as well, because that's where I do the detailed discussion about where the eclipses are falling for you and what that could mean. So I definitely see my June horoscopes as a sister reading to this to get the most comprehensive view, because the eclipses are definitely going to be bringing in changes and surprises and endings and beginnings. So we want to, keep up on what's going on there. Okay, something else that I would like to talk about has to do with the planet Uranus. There you are. Now, Uranus has recently moved into the 9th house for you early degree people, but that's very recent. And as I always say, if something is just recently somewhere else, especially an outer planet, you really have to read it energetically in both places. So for you early people, you still had some energetic influence in the 8th house. We'll talk about what that means. Middle degree people, you still have that very clearly in the 8th house. And late degree people, it's definitely in the 8th house, okay? So we'll talk about what this means. Let's talk about the 8th house manifestations. But first, I want to also note that for you early degree people, so these are my friends right at the beginning of the sign, so we'll just say all of August born or first 10 degrees, you have extra blessings for surprises because Uranus has been making a trine to your ascendant. Now, because there's influence in the 8th and 9th house as this happens, the manifestations could come in from an 8th house perspective, a 9th house perspective, a first house perspective, or all of it. One example that I've seen, one of my favorite Virgos, one of my best friends, recently had her person of, soulmate or whatever you want to call it, come back to her. And that is a typical kind of thing. Uranus, out of the blue, brings a surprise. 8th house is love, romance, intimacy, soulmates. First house is, everything about your physical body, your image, and how you're moving forward, like new chapters opening up. So you early Virgos, gosh, there's even more potential for this awesomeness of surprises coming in that can change how you're walking in the world in a big way. For the early degree placements also, especially early. Surprises having to do with teaching, learning, international travel, spiritual studies are, Uranus is bringing that energy there. For some people, it can bring the energy of doubt about a belief system you've had, which in some ways can be really good because it can make you change how you're looking at things, which can open you up to more possibilities. Most Virgos I know are worriers. So maybe the belief system that you're ready to drop with this Uranus energy is the tendency to worry. Remember that worrying is actually a physiological addiction. So when you try to stop worrying, you can't, right? Because it's wired into your nervous system. So look into EFT for anxiety and EFT for worrying, because EFT restructures your nervous system and affects the neuroplasticity of your brain. That's a big deal. Okay, so if you can affect the neuroplasticity of your brain, you can change your brain, change how it works, change the patterns. And EFT, the emotional freedom technique, tons of free things online you can look for to help you stop worrying. The more you stop worrying, the more you can draw positive things to you. Because if you're a vibrational match for, things that are worrisome, you're more likely to pull those to you. So Uranus here is an extra help to try to help clear those things up. But you middle and late degree placements, you still can do this too. Okay, so surprises having to do with 8th house things are still potentials for the early and are definitely current for middle and late. Now, what does that look like? Surprises having to do with love, intimacy, romance, deep spiritual awakenings, metaphysical discoveries, psychological breakthroughs. This can have to do with inheritances, spousal money, money coming from anywhere, family money, loans. If you're looking for a loan to buy a house or something like that, it could come in from a surprise source. Any of you Virgo placements. So definitely use that energy. And some of the things might turn out to be unconventional. That's one of the things to note about anything. I don't have enough room there. Anything involving Uranus. Unconventional is the way to go. So you could get conventional loan or something, funding, but the place that you will most benefit for a while, especially middle and late degree placements, since Uranus is in this 8th house, is from unconventional ways of doing something. When I had a real estate business, oh my gosh, I was a landlord and flipped houses and owned houses as a focus as my work for 10 years. And during that time, I got very creative with things. If there were, if a no was in a certain direction, I went in a different direction to find where the yeses were. So you might have to get a little creative to find where the yeses are for any of your funding projects. But you have extra energy towards that. This Uranus energy can also bring in some instability. That's the other side of it. So things that come out of the blue, but things that leave equally as quickly, a lot of volatility. So it tests attachments and it tests a foundation and it tests your vibrational matching for the things that you want. So just be really aware of that. If things seem to come in or you're pulling in people who are unstable or you're pulling in volatility, the more inner work you can do to resolve your inner instability and shore up your inner space, the more you can have this Uranus energy manifest in a positive, graceful way. Okay, so these are the things most on my mind for you for this month. Now I'm going to drop in the Mercury Retrograde tutorial. Even if you're not interested in learning about this, I recommend that you watch it, because Mercury Retrograde is happening for half of our lives pretty much. We're in some sort of a retrograde cycle, and the more you understand it, the more gracefully you can move with the rhythms. If you're not interested in the tutorial, you can fast forward until you see me back on the screen, and then I'll go over the general transits, dates to note, and other things to know about the tone of the month that will help you to use the energy in the best way. Hi, this is going to be a quick tutorial of the energy of Mercury as it relates to the retrograde cycle, and the things to keep in mind that are most important to hold in your consciousness as we go through this phase. So the first thing to know is that Mercury is retrograde or in its shadow, pre or post shadow period for about half of the year. So half of our lives we are in this. That's why it's really important to understand it. The second thing to know is that Mercury is retrograde for 3-ish weeks at a time, and there's about a 2-ish week before and after shadow transit. So the pre-transit shadow period and the post-shadow transit period. So all in all, it's about a 7-ish week process. So it is kind of long at a time. And the implications of Mercury retrograde are very strongly seen in this pre-shadow period, and especially in the first part of this post-shadow period, and then they tend to like linger and just sort of wear off towards the end of that post-shadow period. Mercury rules communication and mobility, so anything involving speaking, writing, communicating, publishing, your devices that you use for communicating, your phones, computers, things like that, your cars, vehicles, walking, your mobility, your capacity to be mobile, your legs, the things that make you able to be mobile. If someone's in a wheelchair, their wheelchair would be there, or whatever it is that is related to your personal mobility. One thing to note as I describe the rest of this is that for people who are born with Mercury retrograde at birth, sometimes they feel the opposite effects of what everybody else feels during a Mercury retrograde period, and that things can flow even better for them during a Mercury retrograde period than when Mercury is direct. So if you have come to notice that, it may be because you have Mercury retrograde at birth. And it also may mean that you have, even if you don't officially have Mercury retrograde, and this is definitely a way more technical thing for you to have to try to figure out, but if Mercury was in a pre or post shadow period close to the retrograde, you could experience having Mercury retrograde from the birth perspective, even though it wouldn't as readily show up on your chart. So that's an important thing to note as well. Okay, so what tends to happen when Mercury's in retrograde is that there are changes to plans. There is uncertainty or confusion about what direction to take. There are plans that were made that are called into question. They may turn out to work out, but they get called into question. Things get called into question. Relationships get called into question. The use of devices and transportation gets called into question. Plans get called into question. And then sometimes they'll work out and sometimes they won't. But this calling into question is a typical Mercury retrograde thing. The topics of travel will often come up, and this can be a fine time for travel. There is a misconception that you shouldn't travel during Mercury retrograde. That's not true. You just have to be more aware because plans tend to change. Gates tend to change at the last minute. Issues with a car tend to come up if you're on a road trip, if you haven't, gotten everything checked out first or whatever, or even sometimes if you did. Impediments to travel, changes. When you're making agreements, Mercury also rules agreements. So if you're agreeing to something, the odds are that you're going to change what you're agreeing to. So it doesn't lend itself as well for long-term or rigid agreements. There are exceptions. If you're in there, don't worry. There are exceptions. But if you are negotiating during Mercury retrograde, you're either not seeing the whole picture, someone is purposely or inadvertently hiding something from you, or there are things that are coming that you're not aware of that are going to change how you can interact in the agreement that you've made. So in general, it is a good idea to be flexible. Flexible, temporary bridge agreements are like the theme that I like to put out there to best use this energy. Let's say you have to negotiate something or you're agreeing to something, and if it's minor or low stakes, you don't have to worry as much. It's the big things, that are more important. But there could be some minor things where it would be helpful to know this. Okay, so keep your flexibility. Try to make a interim or bridge agreement. So like, for instance, let's say you're trying to get a tenant in a house or in a professional space, and Mercury's in retrograde. Something like a month to month, totally awesome to embark on in a Mercury retrograde because you can get out of it. Something like a 3-month lease or even 3 to 6 months, something short term. You can make something for a month and then renegotiate when the planets are more clear, the energy is more clear. So those are ways that I like to deal with the Mercury retrograde. And it's definitely a good time to be aware that you might have things happen to your cars and phones and stuff. In general, I don't love this time as the best time to get a new device or car unless you can help it or unless it's a short-term or interim device. Like let's say you get a temporary phone to bridge you over something, that's more appropriate. Or you get a car that you plan to have for 3 to 6 months. Or, something like that. But for things that you're hoping to keep long-term, the retrogrades tend to make it shorter term. And that's typical. Another place to be careful is launches. Big, awesome, life-changing, once-in-a-lifetime launches are not the ones you want to have when Mercury is in retro. However, let's say you're a teacher and you teach classes twice a year and Mercury retrograde, is the time for your re-enrollment. Re-enrollment is much better supported. But do also expect that when you have launches in a Mercury retrograde cycle, that more people are going to be wishy-washy and there's more of a chance for people that have joined that are going to leave the class. So, it's not always a reliable time frame for trying to get people to commit to things, depending on what the nature of it is. It's hard. Commitments get a little bit more difficult. So basically the things to remember for Mercury retrograde is the flexibility, be extra careful, check your plans, your travel plans and other things and documents and agreements extra carefully. And then anything that has the prefix re, pretty much, there's going to be exceptions to this, but rejuvenation, redoing, re-editing, rethinking, reconsidering, even rest. It's a good time to rest. Anything like that where you're like going back over something is better indicated than something brand new, if possible, unless the new thing is short term or a bridge or something you consider doing, like, oh, I've always wanted to try that. Maybe I'll take that class, and the class is, 6 months or whatever. That can be fine. What we really need to have caution with is the bigger things and the things that are higher stakes, etc. Mercury retrograde can be an amazing time. You can get lots of stuff done, inspiration from the past, tying up loose ends from the past, and preparing for a nice fertile ground for future wonderful things. I'm calling the theme of July 2019 for all signs, 3 times the manifestation power, bold new directions, and time to be brave. It's always interesting when we have a transit like Mercury retrograde that brings this eye to the past, coinciding with so much potential for new energy. So we've got 2 intense eclipses this month, plus 2 new moons this month. Whenever we have a month with 2 new moons, it opens up more potentials for brilliant new paths, but and the same thing with the eclipses. But this is happening all under the cover of this Mercury retrograde. So that means that themes from the past, things worked on in the past, contacts from the past, plans from the past, are all going to factor in very heavily to the new opportunities that come. So we talked at length about Mercury retrograde and where that hit in your chart or will hit in your chart, and also what the implications are there. So we're going to go into some additional things to know about this month. The eclipses obviously are bringing massive changes. The transits this month are pretty equal as far as sweet or challenging, and a lot of them could just really go either way. So when we have a situation where there's a transit that's occurring and someone can either manifest something positive or something challenging from it, it really makes it more important for us to watch how we're looking at things. The perspective that we have on life, the perspective that we have on everything, colors, changes, effects, how we experience things. So the more you can be well rested and positive can help you to frame the energies that come in. And the more present you can be emotionally is also going to flavor this month, because with the eclipses and with the Cancer energies and even with the retrograde energies, there's a massive amount of emotion this month, high emotional tides this month, for better and worse. So amazing culminations, things that you've been hoping for forever can just come to you at this time. I always think about the eclipse time as the vision of the spider with the web. You've spent all this time until July weaving this beautiful web. And sometimes those webs can get really big. I think about the webs I've seen like in the rainforest in Costa Rica, like, you know, taller than a person, these gigantic webs. And of course the spiders that go along with them are pretty big too. But in any case, this web that you've created, now the eclipse time and the retrograde time are both times to just sit back and see what food comes to you. It's not the best time for initiating something huge, although sometimes chance or other things force it to happen that way. But the more you can be flexible, be relaxed, be well rested, not be super intent on pushing an agenda, being flexible, the more you can observe what is coming to you so that you can strike or take in according to what feels the best with the options that come to you. It's a fine time for research, but it's not the best time necessarily to try to push something to happen. It's more of an acceptance of what's coming in and what you're going to do with it. A lot of the eclipse news and changes may have already taken place before the actual eclipses, which occur this month. So you may already be steeped in, rolling around in, coping with, for better and worse, the eclipse changes. So the Cancer energy is bringing in a lot of emotion, a lot of tilt towards the energy of home, family, housing, home projects, you know, things involving childhood psychology, upbringing, having to take some steps backwards in order to be able to take future steps forward. But there's also a coinciding energy of Leo. And Leo is going to give us the audacity to do something with the opportunities that come to us. Also a zest and a passion and creative expression. So in general, new moons and full moons have power for positive changes and things coming to a head, things coming out into the open, things coming to manifestation. When we have eclipses on an eclipse on a new moon or a full moon, it gives us 3 times the manifestation power. So 3 times the new beginnings, 3 times the drama or culmination, or things coming to a head. So it's just definitely a powerful month. Very, very, very intense. Intensity is another keynote of this time. As we talked about in the June horoscopes, and definitely if you haven't watched my June horoscopes, you want to do that because I cover the eclipses in detail. There's so much to talk about for this time period. I couldn't fit it all in 1 month. So in June, I go into detail and tell you exactly where the eclipses will hit for you and what manifestations you can see. So definitely rewatch that here in July, even if you watch them in June, so that you can be better poised for understanding the changes that are coming. But in general, the eclipse cycle of Cancer and Capricorn bring in lots of changes to home and family and work and your place out in the world, things with mother and father, and your maternal and paternal energies. Look back to 2009 to 2011 and 2000 to 2001. Those are the times when we experienced this Capricorn Cancer eclipse cycles in the past. So you might see patterns. And I have gotten this question. If those have been your worst times, don't worry. That's not necessarily going to happen again. It's the themes that are brought up that are common to have a continuum. So the areas of life that were a focus, those will likely be a focus at this time. And it doesn't have to manifest the same way that it did. Okay, so I'm just going to hit a couple of highlights here as certain dates to note that are my favorite or my most you have to watch out for. If you want a complete list of the aspects that are occurring and what's involved with those aspects, what planets and signs are at play, and what you can expect from those, definitely sign up for my free email newsletter at anniehelpsyou.com. You'll also get my 28-day virtual coaching program called Shine for free when you sign up for my free email newsletter. Plus, you'll get a written detailed email newsletter a month before, just like I do the horoscopes a month before, of the dates and the aspects and what to look out for, so you have them for your planning purpose and you get those a month early. So you can see that at anniehelpsyou.com. But we'll hit some highlights here. The new moons are going to be, well, first the new moon and the solar eclipse, 10 degrees of Cancer, is on July 2nd. So that is a time of major intensity. I do have blogs on my website for how to make the most of each new moon and each full moon in the different signs. So definitely check those out. Mercury is going to go retrograde at 4 degrees of Leo and back to 23 degrees of Cancer. We talked about this at length, but that's occurring on July 7th, and that pretty much goes until July 31st or August 1st, depending on your time zone. The whole month is covered in Mercury retrograde. We've got some challenges to look out for as far as squares and oppositions throughout the month, and you can see the details of that in my newsletter. But one of the things that I most want you to be aware of is the full moon eclipse on July 16th. That is a lunar eclipse, 24 degrees of Capricorn, lots of intensity around that time, things coming to culmination. Be extra careful and also look out for extra rewards and things that you've worked on from the past that can come in a big way. I always try to keep that period of time a little bit light if possible. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but just be extra careful around that time. What they say about the full moons with, crazy things happening is really true. Whenever you watch these mystical shows or like Merlin or whatever, it's always a full moon when these, crazy things go on. So just take note of that and be prepared to deal with whatever comes. The second full moon, or rather the second new moon, is at 8 degrees of Leo, and that's on July 31st or, thereabouts, depending on your time zone. So the second new moon in the calendar month is a black moon, and there's extra power at this time for wishes and new beginnings. So plenty of opportunities for new beginnings. This month is just chock full of them. Throughout the month, we have some challenges with Uranus, we have challenges with Pluto, we have challenges, Pluto, Uranus, kind of a theme there, Saturn. So some of the outer planets are in challenging configurations, and this can bring tests, but it doesn't have to be a be-all, end-all. Often it can bring overstimulation, and that could be a major theme of this month. We could get through this month and have complete positive outcomes and no negativity at all. Certain people will have that experience. Other people will have massive drama and lots of challenges, but there's no one way it has to go. It's wide open here. But understanding the element of the opposition is important because oppositions are pulling us in two different directions. So be prepared to be pulled in two different directions, and also be prepared to be overstimulated. This is going to be an incredibly busy month physically, like moving around, doing stuff. Emotionally, it will be busy. You will be handling things. You might be holding space for other people who are dealing with changes. During eclipse cycles, we'll often see people around us going through massive change, and sometimes we are too. So it's hard to tell at this point if you're going to be a space holder for other people as they go through these big changes, or if you're going to be one of the people going through the big changes, or both. Sometimes in eclipse time, we're going through these big changes and we're also holding space for other people doing that. So be prepared to be overstimulated emotionally and mentally. That's why this theme of just trying to be well rested is really important, because we know that you can't really handle things as well when you're tired. So the more you can be not tired and take your supplements and, do whatever you need to for support, do your walks, do your exercise, you're going to much better be able to use the energies that are present at this time. And there are a lot of sweet aspects in between these challenging ones. So there are some nuisances, but there are lots of sweet things too. Okay, so definitely go to my website, anniehelpsyou.com. I have an extensive astrology blog plus other blogs that you can check out there on different topics. If you resonate with how I teach and would love to learn, my astrology apprenticeship program is open for enrollment, and I will teach you everything you need to know to do astrology professionally, or if you just want it for your self-development process, it's amazing for that as well. You can check out all the other kinds of goodies I have on my site, including subliminal recordings that I create for you to help and train your brain to the positive changes that you're trying to make. And you can also see my other professional development courses there. Definitely check out my book, Radical Prayer, Transform Your Life and the World in 28 Days. As I mentioned before, it has become a purse friend. It has become a car friend, a bedtime companion. It's just an amazing book for the spiritual seeker to really help you to use the power of word and prayer and intention to manifest the positive changes you want to see in your life. Check out my husband's website, IamHelios.com. He has amazing options now for you to use audio, subliminal, power-packed, frequency-enhanced recordings to mitigate the negative energies of transits and to enhance the positive energies of astrological transits. So we've worked together in the way of trying to figure out what resources would be best for you based on the things I see in the charts. So you can see the options for audios that can help you to maximize the transit. So you can check that out at IamHelios.com. Also, you can book a live reading at my site, AnnieHelpsYou.com, either with me or my amazing apprentice, Marilee. And you can also book sessions with my husband, B.R. Newman, at IamHelios.com. Okay, so those are the things I most have in mind for you this month. I hope you have a wonderful month, and I'll see you next month. Bye.